Hi, I'm Ari, I'm the Oak Witch, and today's video is going to be how to deal with imposter syndrome in the craft. I've got a funky new setup today. I'm not in front of my altar because I'm trying to maybe make that a little bit more private. So yeah, I've changed around my altar now, and I like the way it looks, and I think I want it to be a bit more private. So I've sort of put together this collection of stuff. I've got my herbs, my crystals, so hopefully this will do for now, but anyway. So imposter syndrome in the craft refers to the idea that you put yourself down for a specific reason. Maybe it's belittling yourself or comparing yourself unfairly to other people, not thinking you're as good as other people, or as witchy enough or experienced enough, or maybe you feel like you're faking it. A lot of different things can impact us and make us feel like we are imposters. In these times we battle magic and deity against logic and reasoning, and I think that can definitely be something which affects people to feel like they have this imposter syndrome because they feel like they're making it up. You know, it's not scientific enough, and I think these things all make us feel like we're invalid, you know, if we're not legit. So if you feel this way, just know that you're not alone. It's quite a common phenomenon within us, within the witchcraft community, or just general occult and pagan community. It's quite common. You are still a witch, you are still a pagan, occultist, whatever you identify with. You are still completely valid. If you feel like an imposter sometimes, if you feel these intrusive thoughts being quite overbearing, you're still valid and it's okay. So without further ado, let's get into some tips on how you can combat this feeling of insecurity or imposter syndrome. So tip number one is to stay aware of your thoughts. So when these intrusive thoughts occur, perhaps try to catch them in the moment. So if it's something like if you're scrolling through Instagram and you see a witch's really beautiful altar and you go, oh, they're a much better witch than I am. Try catch it in the moment, and I think the idea is to reflect on that thought. Try answer it as if it's your friend who's saying it to you. You know, try console yourself, or just at the very minimum just be like, that is an intrusive thought. Just say it like straight to that thought you've just had. Just be like, that's an intrusive thought. Or you know, if there's something relating to anxiety, just be like, this is a symptom of anxiety. This is a tip that I got from this book called The Little Work, and it is a really good book. I haven't finished it yet, but I'm like, is that 60%? I'm like 60% through. It's really good. So I got that little tip from here. But in any case, it's the idea of I guess putting that thought more objective in a way. If you're saying, oh, that's an intrusive thought, you are outlining it as something that you don't necessarily actually believe. And I think that's the issue with these intrusive thoughts. Sometimes they're really believable, and sometimes these anxiety symptoms can feel really real, especially when, you know, you're just passively thinking these things and you end up actually believing yourself, and then it leads to this imposter syndrome. I think especially trying to talk back to your thoughts as if they're like a friend, like a consoling your loved one, because you're more likely to treat them, you know, with kindness, with compassion, than you are to necessarily treat yourselves, especially people who suffer with anxiety and depression and those sort of negative thoughts. I try to console myself as if, you know, my boyfriend was talking to me, or if my loved one was talking to me, you know, I try talk back to myself with compassion. It's not that easy. It's hard. It's a process. So I'm not trying to pass it off as if it's like, oh, this one rule and then you're fine. Mental health is so tricky and complex, and yeah. But I think it's beginning with just staying aware of the thoughts And I guess also in tandem with recognizing what actually spurs these thoughts when you think them. So for example, in my example that I used, it was scrolling through Instagram and it was looking at like other people's witchy content, which is obviously fine in and of itself, but perhaps if you recognize, if you're staying aware of your thoughts and you recognize that that is what is actually causing a lot of these intrusive thoughts, perhaps try spend less time on Instagram. Or just, if you feel yourself getting quite down, just come off your phone, come off any social media or technology, and just do something, try ground yourself, go out in nature, or just read a book, or just try to do something which is separate to comparing yourself on the internet to other people. My second tip is daily practice, which is a phrase people don't like to hear, but I did a video explaining daily practice, or regular practice, which I really recommend watching, because I'm not gonna, you know, reiterate everything that I said in there. But I do think daily practice can help combat and even prevent this feeling of imposter syndrome. I think at a base sort of line, daily practice helps you build a relationship with your craft. It is massively validating because you are doing, you know, little bits every day, and you are feeding that inner magic or that inner soul or inner spirit, whatever you sort of call it. You are feeding into it, you are building your craft, you are honing your magical self, and it's something that you are gradually doing. This isn't like having those expectations of doing one ritual and then expecting it to go amazingly and you feel massively more empowered, which is amazing if you can have those experiences, but daily practice builds up to that feeling gradually. And I think actually knowing how to incorporate magic into your daily life is really rewarding in and of itself, and it makes you feel like that anyway. It makes me feel like that anyway. So daily practice, I think, can help, especially when you get into the idea that if you're feeling imposter syndrome in that, you know, oh, I'm not doing enough, or, you know, I'm not where I should be, etc. Daily practice logically combats that, because you are doing something every day. You are literally working at it regularly and consistently. So if you do have those imposter syndrome thoughts, you can just say to yourself, okay, well, I am doing something regularly. I am literally practicing magic and doing it daily. I'm still going along, I'm still making progress, I'm still walking this path, and I will get there. You know, I think it's the idea that actually you can validate yourself logically. One thing I did actually, again, inspired by this book, this entire video is going to be me plugging this book. It's not sponsored. I just think it's really good. How to Get Over Imposter Syndrome, just read this book. But one thing I did inspired by that book is create my own mini daily ritual, inspired by the LBRP, which is the Lesser Banishing Ritual of the Pentagram. I'll put like a link explaining it below, because I'm not going to explain it. But what I did is I created my own. I didn't steal from the LBRP or anything, but it's just inspired by its core structure, so the grounding, the banishing, you know, the core aspects of the ritual, and I sort of made my own. And I'm not going to go through my own, but it's something that is very personal to me, and I'll say that it includes the elements. So for me, being able to do that every day, being able to have this magical experience, this mini ritual, and it takes like 5 minutes or 10 minutes. It takes like less than 10 minutes. It's really not a large amount of time. But being able to do that every day is massively validating, especially like a ritual in which you're actively trying to connect with the divine. It really is so enriching and empowering. So yeah, I think daily practice is such a good thing to do, and it will really combat that feeling of imposter syndrome. So tip number 3 is to go back to the basics. And I guess what basics look like to you, you know, it's going to be different for everyone. But I would generally say, you know, cleansing, protection magic, banishing, grounding, centering, meditation, those core aspects of witchcraft, go back to them. Try and refine them. Remember why these basics are so important, I think, is the main thing. Going back to basics can really help, especially if you're feeling a bit lost, if you're feeling insecure, if you're feeling a bit overwhelmed, or, you know, something which is leading to this imposter syndrome. Then going back to basic meditation, basic mindfulness meditation, I think can be really rewarding. And I think also this could entail reading like some witchy 101 books, or really like beginner books. And honestly, why not? I see a lot of advanced or intermediates, or people who are a bit more experienced, say that, oh, you know, I don't like reading beginner stuff because I don't need to. And okay, fair, that's completely valid. But I would also say, you know, I'm constantly reading beginner stuff because I think I never want to stop hearing other people's perspectives on their craft. I never want to get to a point where I think that I'm above it. I will always want to read beginner stuff, see what people have to say, see how people are approaching teaching beginners. I don't know, it's just something that's really interesting for me. But anyway, going back to the basics can entail reading some beginner stuff. It's not necessarily because you don't know this stuff, but it's being able to re-understand why it's so important. Get to that point internally where, yes, like, this is why I do this. This is why I'm a witch, you know? Something that I have been reading, because why not plug a book, is this, Paganism for Beginners. And it is such a lovely book. I'm not finished, again, just to add that in, I'm halfway through. But this is the kind of book I wish I had when I was like 13, when I was a kid, learning about paganism for the first time and being completely like, what do? I believe this, but also what is it? So good. But anyway. So reading something like this really helps me like rekindle that like love I have for my deities. It's that idea that like, yes, you know, this is what I believe. This is like the love that I have for my deities. This is why. Sometimes I think, you know, with everything going on, with all the experiences that you have, and sometimes, especially, you know, comparing stuff on the internet, I think it can be quite easy to lose that sometimes. And that doesn't make you any less of a pagan or a witch. It's just what our brains do to ourselves sometimes. It just is the case. So anyway, reading back that basic material, I think can be really massively uplifting and re-inspiring, honestly. So tip number 4, I have already kind of touched on this, or at least I briefly said a sentence that relates to this. And that is to lose expectations. I think sometimes when we feel like we're in a rut, or if we feel lost, or again, like I said before, if we're battling magic with science, or deities, we may have this expectation, so we expect something to happen. Which is fair if you're more advanced and you sort of know what works and what doesn't and blah blah blah. But I think that, for example, with deities, sometimes when you're reaching out to a deity and you already have a expectation of how they would send their message across, how you would receive that message. If you already kind of expect something to happen in one way, I think it can be very easy to actually miss the message if they're sending it in a different way, for example. I think perhaps actually being a bit more open-minded is the tip here, is to have a little bit less of a narrow scope or point of view. Try just be really open. If you're reaching out for a deity, and you have that imposter syndrome, oh, you know, I'm making this all up, or blah blah blah, because you're not receiving a sign, you're not receiving a message, you can't connect to them anymore, you don't feel, or you feel a bit like detached from them, try actually just begin with some devotion. Like, just try send them your love and devotion, just general worship, without the expectation that they'll actually give you something back. Try and just start there and build that base relationship, and lose the expectations. And I think in time, it will be a much more rewarding experience when you do have that ability to see the signs in a more broader sense. Yeah, because I think sometimes we can get a bit like tunnel vision. Something which I wanted to expand on my deity example is, when I was younger I used to get so, I guess when you're figuring things out, I used to get kind of confused at the deities. Like, it would be something that I would believe, and I know that I would believe in deities. But I guess I got into that imposter syndrome of like, oh well, I haven't like seen them, so what if I'm making this up? Like, have other people seen them? Or you know, you hear some stories of people's experiences with deities, you think, oh, well, I haven't had that. You know, what am I doing wrong? Am I actually just making this up? And I think it's because I would place human characteristics on the gods, but they're not human. Why should I assume that the deities are going to appear to me in a specific way? And I think that ties back to the idea of losing expectations. Another thing relating it to magic is love magic. I think there is an issue of consent here as well, which I want to add, but I think it's the idea of trying to make someone fall in love with you, which again is quite ethically but anyway, if you're trying to make someone fall in love with you by doing love charm, love spell, whatever, and you're not seeing results, and you could just be like, oh, what's going on? Why is my magic not working? Am I blah blah blah? Leading to imposter syndrome. Think of it this way, you know, you're going into this expecting something really specific, and magic takes the path of least resistance. So it's less about you not doing something right, more about you're probably not going about it the right way. Instead, for example, if you want to seek love into your life, do a glamour spell. Do something for yourself. Something which makes you feel more attractive, more sexy, more open to receiving love. Try do a glamour spell in that on yourself, instead of attracting like a really specific person. If I did a love spell on Zendaya to fall in love with me, she wouldn't do that. It would not work because she has no idea who I am. So it would just be silly magic. Does that make sense? So I think in terms of linking it back to this idea of losing expectations, that also applies to when you're spellcrafting, when you're like framing your magic. Try not to do something really specific, which is obviously unattainable. Go back to a more broader sense of the magic. So instead of trying to find love for a specific person, perhaps just look inward and try do magic on yourself so that you're open to receiving love. So people will mundanely be more attracted to you because you feel more empowered, you feel more confident, for example. Am I making any sense? I hope I'm making a little bit of sense. Is this tip number 6? I think it might be tip number 6. But tip number 6 is to learn a new topic, which can kind of seem like I'm defeating the point, but I think it can help. I think maybe sometimes getting massively stuck in your own craft can feel like, you know, can lead to that imposter syndrome, but actually going into a new topic with your eyes just wide open, just open to new experiences, can actually feel quite empowering. For example, I am half Costa Rican, my mum's born in Costa Rica, and obviously I'm British. But the idea of learning about Latin American practices, brujeria, you know, Curanderismo, all those things are really interesting to me. Not gonna call myself a bruja, but it's interesting to me at least, and it's something I want to learn more. So I've been buying some books, some material, reading up on the topic. I recently bought this. I haven't actually gone through it yet because I've just been way busy with books. This is Magia, and I am really interested in this, and I'm excited to read it. Recently read Curanderismo by Erika Buenaflor. I think that's it. I'll put a thing here. But that was really good. That was really enriching. Learning about the Limpias is so interesting to me, and yeah, it was just so cool. So it sounds like a nerd, but it was really cool for me. But anyway, so learning this new topic has been really rewarding, and it's been really sort of like invigorating in a way. I feel like, if anything, my own craft is massively like validated, because I don't know, learning about a completely different practice, a completely different way of, you know, magic or spirituality, that, you know, is different to mine. You know, I don't necessarily practice Latin American folk magic, but it's still really interesting, and it is different to mine, where I am way more British folk magic. But learning about something completely new, completely just different, it feels really amazing in a way, because it's quite literally like comparing and contrasting as you're reading this material. So I think in a way that can feel quite empowering. Yeah, that's it for me today. I think the recurring theme throughout these tips has been to reflect. You know, it's that idea of doing these things, but to also reflect on why you are doing what you're doing. Why are you a witch? You know, why do you practice witchcraft? Why is it that you do what you do? And think about, I mean, you can go through your Book of Shadows, go through, or whatever journal, diary, just go through like the beginning to the end, and just sort of think about like, what is the fire that has kept that flame going? You know, what is that spark that ignited it initially? Try to think of when you first decided you'd start calling yourself a witch. Why? Why did you get into this? And how did you get into this? You know, how did you learn about witchcraft or paganism or whatever you practice? And I think it's going through that idea of really trying to reflect on what makes you a witch, but not necessarily in an artificial sense, in a personal sense. Who are you and why are you a witch? So yes, I'll stop talking now. Thank you so much for watching. I'll put the links to the books I've mentioned below. If you wanna continue talking about this, come join my Discord, the Oak Coven, below. We're in the middle of book club. We're reading Weave the Liminal. We do regular debates and discussions. I've actually just made a voice channel for the server, so hopefully we'll be chatting soon. So if you're interested in that, come join. And yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.